Importantly, is there enough in the budget in terms of job creation, employment and formalization of informal roles? Well, let's discuss all that and more over the next hour or so. I'm joined by a battery of experts in various fields. Let me introduce them to you. I have with me Mr. Dhirendra Kumar, founder and CEO, Value Research, joining in. We've also got Dr. Srinath, Sridharan, policy researcher and corporate advisor. And in the studio with me, I've got Mitali, Nikore, founder and chief economist, Nikore Associates. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for being here on this show with me today. Mr. Dhirendra Kumar, let me begin by asking you and really requesting you to break down this change in the tax structure and what it really means for the middle class.
Well, it does not require any elaborate breakdown. It's very simple. If you earn 12 lakh rupees, the minimum that you save on taxes is 78,750 rupees. And for every higher slab, it is about a lakh of rupees as you go up. So in that sense, it is pretty straightforward. Anyway, the government has been trying to drive taxpayers to the new tax regime, which does not provide any incentive for or any incentive for savings, investments, or any kind of exemption, but it is very straightforward. And there, the rates that is visible on the screen itself is becoming very moderate. So investors or savers will have more money in their hand. And the remarkable thing about this announcement in this budget is that every time there has been such a reduction, it has come with all kind of excuses. It has come in a very reluctant way. This time it has come in a very lavish way. Everybody was expecting 10 lakh. It has come without any, any strings attached and without any ifs and buts, with the encouragement that it is coming with a very straight face that, the government says that it wants to drive up the consumption.
Right. So consumption is one side
of the I would like to just add one more point,
right,
which I think is very crucial, is that all these years, last 20, 30, 40 years, I have run, nearly over 30 years, I have run value research. Indian investors have been initiated to investments entirely by way of tax saving.
Right.
No longer. They will have no, that has been the, starting point. In the first quarter of the year, somebody will tell you that if you invest, then you will get this tax break. No longer. Investment and tax breaks are completely disconnected now.
Right, absolutely. So I wanted to in fact get your view on exactly that. That is this pretty much now the time to kick the old tax regime out of the window, kiss it goodbye, and these exemptions could very well not be part of the new income tax bill which the finance minister has promised to present in the coming week. So can we expect no more deductions, no more old tax regime?
But my sense is that we just have to wait for another week, and when it is expected. But things are becoming very clear that if you want a no-nonsense return without any ambiguity, without any complication, then the new tax regime is the way to go.
All right. Before I move on, one more question to you, Mr. Dhirendra Kumar, and this one comes pretty much on the social contract which government after government has had with savers and investors. Those folks who have put in, who belong to the higher income bracket, perhaps my generation, in and around my generation, those people who have made investments in these long-term deposits like the PPF, for example, any incentive for them to now stay tuned into those investments, and those have lock-ins of 15 years or so. So number one, you're perhaps, I mean, we'll get to know in a week or so, but perhaps disincentivizing the old tax regime, maybe some sort of cheating with people who have stayed invested in those tools. And then add to that, perhaps we will see these tools of saving money not being as popular and more money going into the markets. And the economic survey has warned that the markets could pretty much be on the verge of becoming asset bubbles.
I would just like to be very specific about the Public Provident Fund. It is India's most popular and sought after fixed income, guaranteed by the sovereign, savings vehicle. And there are two benefits which investors derive by investing in PPF. One is the Section 80C, investment up to 1.5 lakh rupees every year.
Yeah.
is treated as a tax exempt income if you put that money in PPF.
That's right.
That for one is not relevant anymore if you are choosing the new tax regime. You can very well ignore that. Second thing which is only unique to public provident fund is the interest income from public provident fund is the only income
Which is tax free.
besides agriculture which is tax free. There
Right.
is no other form of income which is tax free. So and that has not been touched, that has not been referred. And maybe the ATC becomes irrelevant in the new tax regime, but that particular thing still continues.
Absolutely. Well, I think one more asset class which was offering tax-free returns, but we haven't seen much on that, are the sovereign gold bonds. And I was hoping that the budget would give us some details on that, but I think the budget remained conspicuously silent on the sovereign gold bonds. But before I go to Srinath, and I know Srinath is going to have a contrarian view, he usually does, I want to bring in Mitali Nikore into this conversation. Mitali, help us understand the fiscal glide path. We have revised our fiscal deficit downwards for this year from 4.9% to 4.8%.
Yeah.
Even better fiscal prudence for FY26 at 4.4%.
Yeah.
Now, if we see more and more migration to the new tax regime, lesser direct tax collection for the government, presumably more number of nil filers, is the consumption and GST on consumption going to offset for this deficit in direct tax collection?
So first of all, thanks a lot for having me in the studio and on the show. So I think, at the end of the day, the government has played it very intelligently. Because the category on which the tax exemption has been provided is actually the category which pays the lowest amount of tax but has the highest number of taxpayers and tax filers. Because you see, if you look at the overall size of the population paying taxes, it's about 4 to 5 crore people.
That's right.
Nearly 20% of those, or even 25% of those, would be at least 20-25% of those would be in the exemption bracket.
That's
So
right.
you have, in one stroke of a pen, given this relief to at least 1.5 crore people.
Right.
On top of that, the amount of revenue loss you're making is minimal because they were already in the lowest tax bracket to begin with.
Right.
And you've revised, your limits in such a way that those above 24 lakhs are now paying 30%.
30%.
So you're actually offsetting, and this is what we call classic progressive taxation.
All right.
They have gone for classic progressive taxation to reduce the income inequality in the country and to create a scenario where those who can pay and who have the ability to pay can pay a little bit higher, and those who are struggling should be getting the exemption that they deserve.
Right.
And both of these categories, I mean, we don't expect the consumption of those above the 24 lakh range to get impacted too much with a higher tax.
All right.
And here we are unlocking
But
a lot
those
more
above
consumption.
24 lakhs were in any case paying that tax rate of 30% because they were above 15 lakhs. So that's a valid point. I see where you're coming from. That it's not just the up to 12 lakh rupees salary, but all the way up to anything under, let's say 20 lakh rupees is getting incentivized with a lower tax rate. Okay,
Exactly.
let's bring in Srinath. Srinath, you and I were exchanging some messages earlier, and you didn't really think that it was as much as a big deal it is being made out to be, this tax cut. So your initial views on taxation before we move to anything else.
Yeah, Kartik, I think your program's title is Magic Bullet. I'm glad both those words don't exist. There is no magic.
There's magic and there's a bullet.
And luckily the middle class, the lowest slab also escaped the bullet. I think let's leave those two words away. I think it's, we have to one, appreciate the government. I mean, for a fiscally completely tied in economy that we are facing, I'm glad that they did not go overboard announcing any poster boy things that would have meant large expenses which we wouldn't have been able to afford. I think what to me is the greatest fun is, I think I'll agree with Mitali. I think it is about tax justice to the lowest slab. But let's not get carried away. Let's move to, I think what is going to happen is, will we see inflationary trend in asset classes like real estate and gold as we go on, because the surplus, the surplus amount of tax savings could get driven into some of those economies. And here I want to be a little controversial. I think the middle class, the new middle class of India is what I would call the erstwhile Delhi style by conspicuous consumption. There is no, it's a show of culture, there is FOMO. I think we all have Instagram pressure of living up to their neighbors. I think that, I mean, I'm nobody to comment on how they spend their money. I was a little disappointed that there was expectations around long-term long-term capital gains tax and all that. And for example, bringing fixed deposit taxation slab on par with anybody else didn't happen. I mean, that could have been, I think, a big move for a lot of senior citizens who depend on fixed deposits.
Okay.
I think for me, MSME is a large pivotal role of middle class and lower middle class as well, because you have a lot of single owner entities as well. And I don't think the budget addressed any of those, but for some minor tweaks here and there. Okay. Financially prudent budget overall, but I think middle class, I shudder to think if they're hungry, give them cake too, is what we did for one slab. But what about the rest?
All right. What about the rest? Well, at least there is something, if not enough, if not too much. And see, I think as citizens, as taxpayers, we are never satisfied with what we get, and Srinath pretty much exemplifying that for us today. But before we move on, let's quickly listen into that portion of the budget speech of Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman and the kind of thumping it received in the Parliament when she announced, and she really played it to the gallery, didn't she? I mean, she said, "I'm introducing it, I'm coming to it," and then she just went round, and bang came the last part of the budget, which really resulted in this change in the tax slab. Let's quickly listen in to what the Finance Minister said on the floor of Parliament.
Personal income tax reforms with special focus on middle class. Democracy, demography and demand are the key support pillars in our journey towards Vikasit Bharat. The middle class provides strength for India's growth. This government, under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, has always believed in the admirable energy and ability of the middle class in nation building. In recognition of their contribution, we have periodically reduced their tax burden. Right after 2014, the nil tax slab was raised to 2.5 lakhs of rupees, which was further raised to 5 lakh rupees in 2019 and to 7 lakh rupees in 2023. This is reflective of our government's trust on the middle class taxpayers. I am now happy to announce that there will be no income tax payable up to income of 12 lakh rupees.
Well, that's the kind of appreciation that this magic figure of 12 lakh rupees brought in the Parliament and all over. I think, our newsroom was buzzing, and I'm sure anybody watching the budget speech would have really celebrated today. But let's move on now. And Srinath, I want to just bring you back into this conversation. Let's move on to something that I, as a journalist, and I think a lot of us as working class in the country were expecting, and that was the expectation on job creation. I didn't find too many schemes or, too many announcements on creating fresh jobs. Do you think we've done enough already, or I'm sure we haven't done enough already, because there are enough and more people who are unable to find jobs, or jobs that don't pay as well as they expect their jobs to pay. But I didn't find too much focus on employment. I didn't find too much focus this time around even on manufacturing, barring perhaps one or two sectors like shipbuilding, perhaps clean energy, windmills, solar components, etc. And of course toys happen to be one focus, but apart from that, not much on employment this time around.
Yeah, I mean, Kartik, I think, in fact, in the morning show, we were how we don't have economies of scale and size that a Chinese toy maker would have. I think the reality is that I think it's a political hotbed to speak about anything that will concern employment and manufacturing. I think that would have taken the limelight out of this middle class announcement. I think very clearly the narrative is that we are a slowing economy and we have not pulled.
Right. So I think what Srinath is saying is that the showstopper was the tax for the middle class, but nothing really to take that fizz away from the middle class and go ahead with the. Well, let's just quickly dip into what former Finance Minister Mr. P. Chidambaram has to say. He's organizing a press conference.
5 to 6 minutes to read, and after that, my good friend Mr. Gaurav Gogoi will speak in Hindi, and then we'll take a few questions. The takeaway from budget 2025-26 is that the BJP is wooing the tax-paying middle class and the Bihar electorate. These announcements will be welcomed by the 3.2 crore tax-paying middle class and the 7.65 crore voters of Bihar. For the rest of India, the Honorable Finance Minister had no more than soothing words, punctuated by the applause of BJP members led by the Honorable Prime Minister. Let me first look at the financial performance in the current year, 24-25. Revised receipts are lower by 41,240 crore. Revised net tax receipts are lower by 26,439 crore rupees. On the expenditure side, total expenditure has been cut by rupees 1,04,025 crore and capital expenditure has been cut by rupees 92,682 crore. Of this cut, the sectors that have suffered most and the amounts of cuts are health, 1,255 crore rupees. Education, 11,584 crore rupees. Social welfare, 10,019 crore rupees. Agriculture, 10,992 crore rupees. Rural development, 75,133 crore rupees. Urban development, 18,907 crore rupees. And the development of the Northeast, 1,894 crore rupees. The cruelest cuts were in allocations for the scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, OBC and minorities. Here are a few examples. PM Anisuchit Jati Abhyuday Yojana, budget allocation was 2,040 crore. The actual expenditure is only 800 crore rupees. PM Young Achievers Scholarship for OBC, EBC and denotified tribes. Allocation was 1,836 crore rupees. Actual expenditure will be 1,381 crore rupees. Post-metric scholarship for scheduled castes, allocation was 6,360 crore rupees. Actual expenditure will be 5,500 crore rupees.
Well, former Finance Minister and Congress leader P. Chidambaram there making a case on where the Finance Minister has been able to cut budgets and cut budgets substantially to allocate in other places and prioritize issues for states like Bihar, and of course giving sops to the middle class. And the middle class, as per a Price report, 67% of Delhi comprises of the middle class. So valid arguments being made there. But Mitali, budgets are about adjustments, adjusting one part of or one allocation, one sectoral allocation with another.
Yeah.
I think given that consumption was taking a beating, India's growth was taking a beating, do you think the Finance Minister has been justified in taking the actions that she's taken to put more money in the hands of the people who were grappling with high inflation as well?
No, absolutely. I think there's a global thinking which is emerging right now, which is to say governments overall should be smaller. And there should be more and more money in the hands of people. We've seen even the US president talk about a scenario where the US would have no income taxes.
Yeah.
So, there is a movement towards that, and this is one of the ways in which the government can think about giving more and more liquidity to people to spend where they need to spend and what are the essentials for them. I also want to reflect a little bit on the jobs question, because I think, there was a moment where she talked about employment-led development, and she also spoke about 4 pillars of the economy, really. We talked about MSMEs, agriculture, export promotion, and investment. Now, it was in the investment pillar where I found it very interesting that she was talking about employability, because on jobs, there are 2 sides. One is creating the jobs and industries, ease of doing business, export promotion, all of those schemes which she was announcing in newer sectors should ideally create the jobs. But on the other side, and one of the issues I'm sure many of the entrepreneurs face is hiring, right? You are going to hire, but you don't find a sufficiently skilled person.
That's right.
And there, I think on employability, she spoke a little bit when when she was talking about human capital investment, but I feel like that's where the focus should have been a little more, and focusing on the digital economy. I didn't hear enough of a focus on the digital economy today.
Right.
And we were expecting that. The Deep Tech Fund was announced,
Right.
but we're not entirely sure how many people will be able to benefit from that fund, and will that be a broad-based benefit. So I think there we really need to see much more work. I loved what she said on agriculture, and I think that is a major job creator for the future.
Right.
We always think that manufacturing will create jobs, but it's not necessary. We can see jobs in rural areas, we can see jobs in climate resilient agriculture, food processing.
Right.
And there I think the new thinking which she displayed today about crop diversification, about new seed varieties, this is the kind of thinking we need to advance further.
All right. Well, let's bring in Dhirendra Kumar again into this conversation. Mr. Dhirendra Kumar, agriculture, employment in agriculture. I understand the rural economy upliftment, but agriculture again continues to be a sector where it wasn't expected, but as expected, the government did not obviously introduce any taxes. So the question I want to actually bring to you is from this perspective of widening the tax net and the burden of economic growth and the tax that is collected by the government, the personal income tax that the government collects, that burden not being restricted to very few people, but being shared by a larger mass of people. Do you think Budget 2025 delivered on that widening of tax net and sharing of burden?
No, undoubtedly not. In fact, in the previous budget has always been, very reluctantly trying to make, give any kind of relaxation. In fact, it has always been that, you get a concession or you get a relaxation, and it will come with a lot of, as if, the government is embarrassed to do it. In fact, for the first time, it has come with a fairly open and clear, without any catch, that we are getting this clarity that new tax regime, 12 lakh rupees if you earn 70,000. It is very direct and straightforward. Always in the past, and I think this is the right move forward, because broad basing it, and the cost of administration, the cost of bureaucracy, the cost of the way the taxpayer is ill treated by the for trivial violation, the way it lingers. I don't think we really, as a country, estimate the worth of the overhead. In that sense, I think it's a great way to move forward. Not to say that broad basing. If the government has worked towards making GST scalable, applicable, everybody is a taxpayer and is a very liberal taxpayer in this country.
Right, absolutely. And I want to take one more question to you before we move on. This also sort of is in the realm of personal finance, and this is by way of certain changes made in TDS and TCS. In fact, on TCS, the exemption on TCS being collected on international spends has been raised from 7 lakh rupees to 10 lakh rupees, and even the exemption has come in by way of education loans. So from a personal finance point of view, the simplification of tax rates on TDS and enhancing the limit on TCS for international travel. Just explain to us what seems to be the rationale behind this, and how does this help the wallet of the taxpayer?
No, it is more than the wallet. It is actually the headache, because the moment you have this TCS and the way you go about recovering it, the cumbersome process and the way you go about retrieving it back, even if it is not, because this was made a law not very long ago, that the moment you remit the money, you have to, that this gets applicable, and then it has to be recovered in your tax filing. But not to mention what Sridhar said earlier, I would like to point to three things which I think have been little beneficial. I think a lot more can be done about them, but have been beneficial for the senior citizen. One is this TDS applicable on the interest that has been increased from 50,000 to 1 lakh rupee. Second is, if you had a rental income of 2.5 lakh rupees, that has been increased to 66 lakh rupees. That I think is quite reasonable. Otherwise, for most people in their senior citizens, they are otherwise not a tax. They are not filing return, but just to get your get your refund, you will have to file it. So, and TDS effectively becomes, it enforces you to do that. That is the second one. Third is that, third important thing that has happened is that, the definition of long-term, fixed deposit, if held for 3 years, the interest income will be taxed almost like your long-term capital gains, 12.5%, which I think is very beneficial for all the retirees who are long-term fixed income investors.
Right. Okay. Srinath, final word to you. I want to understand from you and help the viewers understand from you that how much of this budget was really about the economy and how much of it was about political management, especially for Delhi's middle class, and the number of times that Bihar was mentioned in the budget speech.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the Delhi part of it here. I think definitely Bihar. It certainly looks like the newest political capital of India. But having said that, I think one fair statement Dhirendra made about trusting citizens. Every budget we hear that we're going to be more transparent in trusting citizens, but the tax regime still seems to doubt its very citizens. I think that has to change. But more important context, one positive takeaway, we still have to look at the detail, is that we are going to bring gig economy workers in the safety net, some kind of social security safety net. I think that's a very, very good one. But to me, the missed opportunity politically, and I'm hoping that this year ahead, we will have what I call the LAL reforms, land, agri, and labor. If you're very serious about geopolitical viability, we're going to find Trump becoming stronger, China, a lot of those conditions. To me, we have not done anything about climate change. We spoke about climate taxonomy last budget. Nothing has come out so far. AI, it's a minuscule spends. We are nowhere near the global AI scenario. So lots to catch up. But again, the positive I want to close with, for the first time, we are going to move ahead with nuclear energy. To me, that's a very, very big move.
100 gigawatts by 2047, of course, some action there. Well, let's leave it at that, gentlemen. And Mitali, thank you so much for taking time out and being with us here and deconstructing budget 2025 and what it means for you, the middle class taxpayer. Time for a short break now, but coming up on the other side, an exclusive conversation with Dr. Arvind Virmani and his take on budget 2025. Stay tuned to Newsline Live.
Special partner
SBI Live, अपने लिए अपनों के लिए.
Associate sponsor, New Virtus GT Line, Style to Wander.
Your promise is IGI certified. 14-step grading process. IGI Trust certified.
एक्सरसाइज करा करा के मेरी जान निकाल देगा तो तेरा और हमारे बिजनेस का ध्यान कौन रखेगा?
अपने साथ अपनों की लाइफ फिट रखने का परफेक्ट प्लान. कैनरा HSBC लाइफ इंश्योरेंस टर्म प्लान. कैनरा HSBC लाइफ इंश्योरेंस, प्रॉमिसेस का पार्टनर.
Mama must be missing us, na?
Let's take it one day, give me one day. Feel the itch under my skin, it's a one day. You be like it when you see we are done. Hey, it doesn't matter, just gotta get going.
New GT Line, Tygoon and Virtus. Volkswagen.
You were the chosen one to direct Mr. Bachchan for his first endorsement, for his first appearance on the small screen.
It was a life-changing moment.
Have you been a rebel with a cause?
There was a sense of responsibility, there was a sense of frustration.
Are you worried about cancel culture?
You tell a story with a fierce psychosis, you're gonna spoil it anyway.
country for a reason tonight.
Will it change the shape of American foreign policy? Violence has erupted in Manipur once again. How can we pass judgment, sir, before any inquiry that, they were volunteers or militants, sir?
You're watching our special coverage of Budget 2025. Magic bullet for middle class. Well, that is what our question was in the run-up to Budget 2025. And yeah, no longer a question mark. I think it's fairly clear that Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has delivered indeed a magic bullet for the middle class by way of the change in tax slabs and no taxes for salary up to 12 lakh rupees. But that's not all. The budget is not just about income taxes. The budget is also about growth and GDP projections, manufacturing, job creation, agriculture, and a lot more. So let's deconstruct all of this. To begin with, of course, the tax story, and thereafter a lot more with none other than Dr. Arvind Virmani, member Niti Aayog, joining us on News 9 Live. Dr. Virmani, it's a pleasure having you back right here on News 9. And let me begin first by asking you the most obvious question, which is top of mind for everybody, is that the Finance Minister has indeed delivered a bonanza for the middle class by way of exempting taxes up to 12 lakh rupees and an incremental advantage in saving taxes even for the higher income bracket by up to 1.1 lakh rupees per annum. My first question to you, and a fairly direct, simple one, Dr. Virmani, the tax cut will eventually lead to a consumption boost. I want you to help explain to me and our viewers, how much is that multiplier on consumption boost and how would that indeed lead to GDP growth, sir?
So let me start briefly with the background and then the impact.
Okay.
The background, there's two things. One is that as we saw last year, the latest HECS survey, that poverty has been measured for 50 years is virtually gone. So what we are left with is pockets of poverty, plus everybody else is in a sense in the lower middle class. There is of course 20% of those people who are still vulnerable, but they can kind of be considered lower middle class. So that is one part of the background, that as the Prime Minister said, we have to start thinking of both the poor and the middle class, which is really the lower and middle if you call it. So that is one thing. The second is that in a way the formal labor force, which is part which pays the income tax, the inflation rate that they have faced has been the increase in nominal wages is not as high as the inflation, and therefore in some sense their real wages have been getting taxed at higher wages, even though the real wage may not have increased as much. So this could be seen partly as a inflation adjustment, so that the real taxes paid on these wages are nominal, so are the same, so right. Same as what they were earlier. Sure. So given these two things, the effect will be on the consumption of this lower segment of population which pays income tax, and undoubtedly what that will mean is a higher consumption. But what has the let's tie it to the macro first to get the growth effect. So as we we had El Nino 2 years or so ago, and one had predicted at the beginning of the current year that rural consumption would recover, but what was a little surprise in a sense to mine, because I do my own forecasting, was the slowing down of the urban, and partly due to uncertainties all over the world. But let's leave that aside. The consumption did recover, but it hasn't overall
Sure.
taken together has been recovering from the pandemic, but it has not really gone back to the levels which prevailed before the pandemic. So that is kind of where the effect of this tax reduction will be felt. I expect that this will help consumption go back to that level, and given that the actual implementation of the capital allocation may not have changed, but there was, for various reasons, elections, etc., whatever, a kind of slowing down on the expenditures actually made, that will also recover. And these two things taken together will certainly result in taking growth back to levels which we anticipated before this little downturn in the third quarter.
Right. Dr. Virmani, I want to take you back to something you were just mentioning some time back, that we are using an old definition of defining the poverty line, and then, you know, there are statements coming every fortnight or so that so many have been lifted out of poverty. I want to understand from you, sir, what are the matrices that you use, and how does one define who exactly comprises the middle class and what exactly is the poverty line?
No, I don't think, I mean, you have to be very careful with the words we use. There are standard international definitions, because there's so much controversy about anything we define. I stick to just for discussion, I stick to the use of international poverty line. Those are well known, the methods are well known, the translation into from dollars to rupees are well known. They used to be 50 years ago, they were invented. There was the $1, $2, $4 poverty line, which was defined by the World Bank. They have been upgraded, adjusted for inflation. Now I think the latest version of $1 is $2.15, etc. But just for fixing in your mind, there is no updating as such. The updating always happens as adjustment for inflation happens. So when we say poverty has virtually been eliminated, we are talking about what is now sometimes called absolute poverty, which is the old $1 line translated into current rupees, so to say. The $2 line shows us that the poverty has also gone down dramatically. $2 poverty line. These are standard lines. There is no outdating about it. But we have to be clear which one we are talking about. So in that context, the poverty has gone down over 11 years from roughly 55% to 20%. Okay? So now we can either call it the new poverty line, or we could call it the vulnerable population. So because there is so much confusion in India about what is poverty, what is not, I prefer to call it the vulnerable middle class population. That is why okay? So that also has to be looked after now. We have to shift the focus. That's the main point I'm making here. Okay. Let us not keep thinking of the poor in the way we have been doing for 50 years. That poverty is virtually over. Over doesn't mean there's nobody. You know,
the definition has changed.
4 billion people, you'll find 1 million people somewhere in the hills or somewhere. I'm not saying, but there you have to go and find them and do something about it. General policies will not help.
Right, you're right, Dr. Virmani. And there's one more very old definition that we've been using, and a very old structure we've been using, and that is the Income Tax Act. We heard Finance Minister mention today that she would be introducing a new income tax bill as early as next week. So as an economist, you think it's about time to retire the old tax regime altogether?
Very, very important question. Okay, so I retired as CEA in 2009. The last meeting I took was on the direct tax code, which as CEA I approved from the economic angle before I left. It has been years. There was subsequent committees appointed by Finance Minister Jaitley, etc. It's taken a long time, partly because there are so many different parts in an income tax bill. You have to satisfy, many constituencies. You have to look at the economics. You look at the foreign impact, etc. So this bill is very, very, very important. I cannot understress it. And what the Finance Minister has given us a hint is that firstly it will be laid in the House in next week. Secondly, it will reduce the size of the the bill by 50%.
Right,
but
make
it's
it
not
simpler.
just the size, it's the simplification.
Exactly.
And I don't know how else to convey, but I do have a copy of my old, that bill which I mentioned, direct tax code, and it means simplification in everything. Okay, beyond that, I mean, I don't want to get into details of what is in this bill, but in that old code, the old code had references to section, subsection, clarifications, etc. Hopefully, this new bill is going to get rid of all that cross-referencing, etc., and simplify the definitions, simplify the impact, and in my view, it will have a huge long-term impact on growth.
I'm sure, sir. And another long-term impact that we must consider is by way of the formalization of the gig economy, and as many as 1 crore gig workers likely to benefit with their inclusion in the e-Shram portal. I want to understand from you, Dr. Virmani, this again is a lower income section of society, perhaps is going to not be part of the tax bracket where there is going to be a sizable contribution from them towards contributing to the government's tax kitty. But are there other ways in which you see the gig economy contributing to the larger Indian economy, especially by way of startups that employ them?
So, as you know, this government has from the start put a lot of emphasis on startups. And one of the most egregious tax impositions which was imposed, if I remember, around 2010 when I had just left the finance ministry the last time, and one has been trying to get it removed. Finally, the government removed this, I think in the July, the last budget. So the startup economy is the key. It is the new MSME, remember, much of the MSME sector is in that 85% informal economy.
Sure.
The future is the formal economy. Every country in the world has much higher, even countries at our per capita level, income level, have higher formal sector. So the startups are the things which are going to drive that. They are also going to drive innovation in every sector, including, for example, fintech, etc. You heard of, insurance. So the gig economy is intimately linked to that and to innovations in service tech, so to say. So the challenge is how to do something to make the lives of gig workers more secure and safe in the sense of financially safe, without killing the innovation which is happening. So this balance has to be struck. So that is what these things announced in the budget are trying to do, to provide whatever social insurance that the government is trying to provide to other workers, to provide these to gig workers, so that this innovation system keeps moving, and the gig workers also have a social security net under their feet.
You did mention the insurance part, but I'll come to that in just a bit, not for the gig workers, but the FDI on insurance separately. But before that, I want a quick view from you, Dr. Virmani, on GCCs and the focus on Tier 2 cities to become the hub for GCCs, global capability centers. Is Tier 2 in your mind a viable option for GCCs? And I'm a little skeptical as a journalist, Dr. Virmani, because I believe we perhaps don't have the right skill sets and the right education to map with the requirements of GCCs. In fact, it's hard enough to find skilled labor in the key metros. Tier 2 cities, don't you think that's going to be one of the bigger challenges? And how viable really do you think that's going to be?
So, what we understand and hear is that the GCC are already reaching down into the Tier 2 educational systems, the Tier 2 cities, to recruit workers. We also know that the cost of a worker in general is less, because there's a nominal wage and there's a cost. So the cost of living in Tier 2 cities will be much lower. So effectively you can give the same real wage but much less out of your pocket in terms of nominal wages. So to some extent the GCCs are already doing this by picking people out of the second. So your question is very valid. So what is the intent of the budget? The intent of the budget is to get the states from which they are drawing these recruits and the cities from which they are drawing it to improve the quality of life in these cities so that these workers don't leave, but the GCCs find it profitable to set up sub-centers in these cities.
But the skills?
So that is the concept behind it, that and this is feasible. So what we are trying to do is to remove restrictions, complications, etc., which will keep them from doing it. So it's kind of like a win-win, I mean the classic win-win situation for the state, for its citizens, and for the GCC centers. Now it's not easy, you are absolutely right, it is not easy. So your question is definitely valid, but I think we must try to get all the states, all the cities to participate in this new service economy, and also I should mention the export part, to facilitate exports, but not just exports, but integration into global supply chains, whether it's at first tier cities or second tier. Eventually they'll have to go down, because I've visited some of these places, they're getting very crowded, not just for service GCCs, but even for industrial plants.
Right. I want to now come to what I said. I'll come to Dr. Virmani, and this is about FDI in insurance. FDI in insurance has been hiked from 74% to 100%. Why was this sector not 100% open for FDI earlier, Dr. Virmani, and what has changed now for us to go up from 74% to 100%, and how will this actually impact the insurance industry?
So, you know, there's one, there's basically been one fear, which is that, and which is addressed in this opening, which is the insurance premiums will be collected from Indian public.
Right.
And what this puts is some kind of a conditionality that the investment from that should be back into the Indian economy. So that's really the fear which this opening actually opens up and gives a signal that it's not because we somehow are fearing that you will have 100% of the equity. We have no fear of that, but we do want the money which is collected, the long-term funds which are collected, to be invested back into long-term investment, which includes infrastructure, etc. But it's up to them where to invest it. But there are lots of opportunities. We are trying to attract sovereign wealth funds, etc. So actually there should be enough opportunities for these insurance companies to invest in India. They just have to get more involved, to think more clearly about the economy, and then they don't have any foreign exchange risk also, which they would have if they have to move back and forth between India and outside investment.
Sure. I want to shift focus now, Dr. Virmani, briefly to manufacturing, and I felt personally that this budget 2025 was a little subdued on the Make in India story, on the manufacturing story. Yes, there were mentions of, let's say, creating toys, clusters and clean technology, but I found that the budget did not really offer a roadmap for India to become competitive, and I really don't understand, do we have a competitive advantage on cost or quality or neither? And is it really the job of the budget in the first place to give a roadmap like that, sir?
See, I think roadmaps in the sense of plans, of course, there's no planning, planning commission was abolished, there's no plans here. I think I've talked to you about this earlier.
Yes, sir.
The plans now are made by the departments, the ministries, and by the states. Okay, so plan for MSMEs have to come from the MSME department and the heavy industry department. So the budget is not supposed to give you a plan. You may still have complaints, but I'm just trying to put in perspective. So what the budget is trying to do is to identify certain key elements of things which the budget can do to remove obstacles in the way of MSMEs. So there are a lot of regulatory measures, there are support measures about how the export mission, there is a regulatory review commission, there is a Direct Tax Act which is going to have a big impact on reducing the compliance cost as far as business taxation is concerned. So there's a whole bunch of things. Skilling is absolutely key for driving the growth of MSMEs into the future. So there are all these elements which I think from my perspective actually are the ones which are going to produce results. But perhaps you have something which may still be missing. I'm not, yeah.
All right. Well, I'm running out of time, Dr. Virmani, but before I let you go, I can't help but ask you that that there was so much mention of Bihar in Budget 2025. I want to understand from you, has the budget done justice to the economics of India, or has it done justice to the politics of the party? Your view, sir.
Look, let me answer it in the same spirit. You know, I have watched like 20, 30 budgets in my life, actually sitting in front of the TV and watching. Of course, few of them I was present in Parliament when I was CA. Believe me, in all these budgets, there's always some emphasis on some states for reasons you know very well, I know very well, everybody. So this is not a new occurrence. That's all I would say. You know, the previous budget may have put some perhaps long neglected emphasis on Andhra Pradesh. Perhaps this budget puts a long neglected emphasis on Bihar, but this is something which happens over the years, you know. Some other time there may be an emphasis on another state and so on.
Right. Well, let's leave it at that. Dr. Virmani, always a pleasure having you right here on News 9. And thank you so much for making time and being here with us today. And before we end, a quick look at some of the corporate reactions coming in from CII and industry leaders Sanjeev Puri and others really chiming in on what they felt about Budget 2025. We leave you with some of those interactions.
This whole spirit of collaboration, public-private partnerships and collaboration with society, I think trust is a very fundamental aspect to it. And we have seen that actually in action, for example, through the faceless income tax processes and so on and so forth. So much has been, done in this area over a period of time. Now, the reference you're giving, I think specifically is to the income tax relief to the middle class. Yeah. So I think it's very welcome. It's very welcome because the household budgets were under stress. Because stuff like food inflation has been sticky, interest rates are high, so EMI has also been taking a larger share of the wallet. So I believe that this will translate and provide some impetus to consumption and therefore really feed into this whole virtuous cycle of consumption, investment, employment and growth.
So the budget clearly has been well thought through because it addresses multiple issues across the board, things like agriculture, education, healthcare, technology, deep tech, export facilitation. So it is broadly, I would say, 3 or 4 pillars. One is building individual personal capabilities, focusing on nutrition, focusing on lactating mothers. So it's actually interestingly done. Then for the poor, there are multiple initiatives. For the middle class and the poor, massive tax break, which is certainly much higher than was expected. People were expecting a tax break, but not straight away to go from 7 lakhs to 12 lakhs without paying tax. Now, the positive fallout of that is this money will go in people's hands, and this will eventually go into either savings or investments or into consumption, thereby leading to higher capacity utilization and therefore investments.
One single takeaway will be that the highlight of the budget. Of course, there are many other important elements. From the consumer durables and electronics industry point of view, the manufacturing investments had kick-started thanks to the PLI schemes. Now, there was a concern about the consumption growth. There have been many categories that had slowed down. Only air conditioners was doing well. Now, and more than 65% of the sale happens through middle class. And this particular initiative or the announcement gives the consumption growth. There is going to be a possibility that the growth will revive for many categories, and that is important for the manufacturing investments to fructify.
Special partner
SBI Life, अपने लिए अपनों के लिए.
Associate sponsor, New Virtus GT Line, Style to Wander.
It's not the fiefdom of politicians. They owe it to the people. Matter is now more about faith of the millions of devotees than just political slugfest. Does that mean that I can't get a job in Chennai, although I may be best suited for that particular job? They have more civic sense. They have more of civility than all these men. My name is Sridharan. Welcome to the South Indian.
Mama must be missing us, na?
Let's take it one bit, give me one day. Feel the itch under my skin, it's a one day. You be like it when you see we are done, hey. But it doesn't matter, just gotta get going.
New GT line, Tygoon and Virtus. Volkswagen.
We made history for a reason tonight.
Will it change the shape of American foreign policy? Violence has erupted in Manipur once again. How can we pass judgment, sir, before any inquiry that, they were volunteers or militants, sir?
If it's a cancer, then what?
It's very distressing.
Anyone can have cancer.
Mentality है कि ये बीमारी मुझे नहीं हो सकती.
There's a thing called cancer is right inside me.
सबसे पहले जो होता है ना, डर जो होता है कि now at the end of the world.
My life went upside down.
Stigma associated with it, which is very scary.
In our country, more than 14 lakh people get diagnosed with cancer every year. Out of that, more than 9 lakhs die every year because of cancer.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
I consider myself as someone who generates commerce out of creativity.
It is very important that cross-section of art and commerce happens.
You can roll the pitch and prepare a person that you're going to communicate to about what you're going to say.
I think once you want to do something, the universe conspires.
India spends $75 billion on foreign cargo vessels.
$75 billion per annum. That's a lot of money.
Imagine a situation where 95% of our cargo is coming on ships which are not owned by us. If we are still not prepared, if someone were to say that we are not going to give you ships, then we'll be stuck. So the entire nation's economy is at risk.
We are very clear that shipping is also strategic, because without that you can't really be the third largest economy in the world.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Well, hello there. Thanks for tuning in to your favorite news destination and welcome to our special budget 2025 breakdown, because the union budget was tabled today and with elections right around the horizon, the stakes couldn't be any higher. From tax reliefs to targeted state allocations, this budget, Union Budget 2025, is as much about economics as it is about electoral strategy as well. Before we start breaking this down, let's first listen into what the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman had to say, her key announcements, the broader strokes of the budget, and of course, the messaging coming to the electorate right from the centre.
Present the budget for 25-26. This budget continues our government's efforts to A. Accelerate growth, B. Secure inclusive development, C. Invigorate private sector investments, D. Uplift household sentiments, and E. Enhance spending power of India's rising middle class. Together, we embark on a journey to unlock our nation's tremendous potential for greater prosperity and global positioning under the leadership of Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi. Access to high quality, affordable and comprehensive healthcare, 100% skilled labor with meaningful employment, 70% women in economic activities, and farmers making our country the food basket of the world.
Well, now one of the biggest takeaways, major relief for the middle class. The government has announced zero tax up to 12 lakh income, a huge breather for about millions across the length and breadth of the country. And this comes even as Delhi's former Chief Minister and Aam Aadmi Party's national convener Arvind Kejriwal, he's been slamming the centre for quote-unquote tax terrorism, accusing it of treating the middle class like their ATM. But what does the Prime Minister say about this budget and its vision for a Viksit Bharat in India? Take a listen.
आज भारत की विकास यात्रा का एक महत्वपूर्ण पड़ाव है। ये 140 करोड़ भारतीयों की आकांक्षाओं का बजट है। ये हर भारतीय के सपनों को पूरा करने वाला बजट है। हमने कई सेक्टर्स युवाओं के लिए खोल दिए हैं। सामान्य नागरिक विकसित भारत के मिशन को ड्राइव करने वाला है। ये बजट एक फोर्स मल्टीप्लायर है। ये बजट सेविंग्स को बढ़ाएगा, इन्वेस्टमेंट को बढ़ाएगा, कंजम्पशन को बढ़ाएगा और ग्रोथ को भी तेजी से बढ़ाएगा। मैं वित्त मंत्री निर्मला सीतारमण जी और उनकी पूरी टीम को इस जनता जनार्दन का बजट, पीपल्स का बजट, इसके लिए
Well, at this point in time, ladies and gentlemen, before we break down what this means for poll-bound national capital and of course Bihar, that's also awaiting elections, assembly elections in November this year itself, let's listen in to what former Finance Minister and Congress leader P. Chidambaram had to say.
The takeaway from budget 2025-26 is that the BJP is wooing the tax-paying middle class and the Bihar electorate. These announcements will be welcomed by the 3.2 crore tax-paying middle class and the 7.65 crore voters of Bihar. For the rest of India, the Honorable Finance Minister had no more than soothing words, punctuated by the applause of BJP members led by the Honorable Prime Minister.
Wooing the imagination of the middle class. This is why, let's start breaking this down. First and foremost, the national capital, where another major electoral battle is brewing, the fight for the middle class vote that seems to be heating up. Now, the middle class, often overlooked, is now at the center of this budget discussion. The big announcement was, of course, the zero tax up to 12 lakh rupees income, and this is being seen as a direct counter to Kejriwal's accusation that the center is accusing the middle class and using the middle class as an ATM. But is this a genuine economic reform or a strategic move ahead of the Delhi elections? After all, the middle class makes up 45% or more of Delhi's population, far higher than the national average, and has historically been a decisive force when it comes to elections. Let's take a look at the major voices on this particular front. The main reactions coming from the BJP, the Aam Aadmi Party, when we're talking about Delhi and the Union Budget 2025.
Personal income tax reforms with special focus on middle class. Democracy, demography, and demand are the key support pillars in our journey towards Vikasit Bharat. The middle class provides strength for India's growth. This government, under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, has always believed in the admirable energy and ability of the middle class in nation building. In recognition of their contribution, we have periodically reduced their tax burden. Right after 2014, the nil tax slab was raised to 2.5 lakhs of rupees, which was further raised to 5 lakh rupees in 2019 and to 7 lakh rupees in 2023. This is reflective of our government's trust on the middle class taxpayers. I am now happy to announce that there will be no income tax payable up to income of 12 lakh rupees.
देखिए, इससे जो छोटे व्यापारी हैं उनको क्या लाभ हो रहा है? उनके 12 लाख के आमदनी पर तो आपने कोई टैक्स की राहत दी नहीं, पहली बात। दूसरी बात, आम आदमी पार्टी के राष्ट्रीय संयोजक केजरीवाल जी ने जो मांग की थी कि अगर आप ये फैसला लें कि भाई उद्योगपतियों के कर्जे आप माफ नहीं करेंगे, अपने पूंजीपति दोस्तों के कर्जे आप माफ नहीं करेंगे, और जो 16 लाख करोड़ रुपए के कर्जे आपने माफ किए हैं अब तक, उसकी वसूली करेंगे, तो देश में जीएसटी की दरें और इनकम टैक्स की दरें आधी की जा सकती हैं। बहुत बड़ी राहत इस देश के मिडिल क्लास को और इस देश के आम आदमी को मिल सकता है, लेकिन वो नहीं किया गया। आपने देखा, कोई ऐलान नहीं किया गया इस प्रकार का कि जो पूंजीपति हैं, बड़े बड़े जो प्रधानमंत्री जी के दोस्त हैं, बीजेपी के दोस्त हैं, जिनका लाखों करोड़ रुपए का कर्जा बाकी है, उनका कर्जा माफ नहीं किया जाएगा। लाखों करोड़ रुपए का कर्जा जो माफ किया गया है, उसकी वसूली कैसे की जाएगी, इसके बारे में कोई स्पष्टीकरण नहीं।
No, I think frankly the applause you heard from the BJP benches was for the middle class tax cut. We look at the details and that may be a good thing. So if you have a salary, you may be paying less tax. But the important question is, what happens if you don't have a salary? Where is the income going to come from for you to benefit from income tax relief? You actually need jobs. Unemployment was not mentioned by the finance minister in her speech. And the generation of jobs becomes vital because in our country, not only do we have record unemployment, youth unemployment is particularly grim at the moment. We have the world record in youth unemployment and in college educated unemployed. So what is the method to generate jobs for these people? Then they can get salaries and they can cheer the tax cut. But those who don't have salaries are not going to cheer the tax cut.
So is this tax relief a counter to Kejriwal's tax terrorism charge? And will it shape Delhi's election narrative? Let's get the snowball rolling. Joining me here on the broadcast is Preeti Menon, spokesperson for the Aam Aadmi Party. A very warm welcome to you. Neoma Gupta, spokesperson for the BJP. Always a pleasure to have you with us. And KV Prasad, senior journalist. A very warm welcome to you, sir, as well. Neoma, I'm going to quickly come to you. The latest tax relief, is this the game changer for the BJP just days before Delhi finally goes to vote?
Hi, good evening. Thanks for having me, as always. This debate, I'm actually going to put across what I feel are the really important takeaways. And, the budget is always around this time. So it's not like it's been put at a deliberate time for the Delhi elections. And the key takeaways today are the 3 M's, which is the middle class, the manufacturing and the MSMEs. The middle class has got the most, it's got a well-deserved and desired relief for the middle class. The tax slabs have been tweaked to ease financial burden. Now there will be no income tax payable up to 12 lakhs and the salaried class, that means no income tax payable till 12.7 lakhs due to the available standard deduction of up to 75,000. Also, the limit of the tax deduction on interest for senior citizens, which is a very key point, is being doubled from the present 50,000 to a lakh. Please understand, when it comes to this budget, it has a local as well as global context within which it's been presented, and the performance we've delivered despite challenges to many other countries which are smaller than us. You look at the Russian-Ukraine war, you look at the Israel-Hamas crisis, post-COVID economic slowdown. Despite this, the Modi government is managing a fiscal deficit of 4.4% along with a now superb tax cut with zero tax up to 2 lakhs. The manufacturing is booming, the MSME will boom. So to come and say that, these guys have done it, especially to hit the electorate, is a very inane claim being made only by one party, which is the Aam Aadmi Party. I actually want to ask, what has their party ever done for the middle class? The garbage is in the West, there's no water, there's no roads, there's no work, work on sewage. Go to any constituency and see the anger the middle class has towards them for wasting their tax money and giving them zero in return. But yes, I'm sure they will claim that, they are claiming actually that we have brought up this point. Let me just put a brief history. Over the past decade, more than 25 crore Indians have transitioned out of poverty and become the new middle class. And who do you think is taking center stage in this India's phenomenal recent progress of sports, startups, space exploration, technology? It's this very middle class. In fact, India has made a massive jump in the Global Innovations Index from 81 in 2015 and 40 in 2023. And this is all enhanced with more than 50,000 of Atal tinkering labs. So this coming and saying this is a timely thing before the election, it's wrong. It was thought of. And just to tell you, an economic survey is done well in advance before any of these points are put forward. So there is a big history to this. The economic survey, in fact, takes a long time, much before Kejriwal ji even came and made a desperate attempt to placate the middle class after neglecting them.
All right, Neoma, we'll let Preeti Menon respond to your particular queries and questions. Preeti Menon, over to you. Of course, people do also want to understand that Arvind Kejriwal has time and again come out and said, put that tax terrorism charge. Does that sort of disarm that particular angle? Does that disarm that particular charge by the Aam Aadmi Party? And of course, respond to what Neoma put forth.
Personally, I don't know why the BJP spokesperson is so much on the defensive. She obviously realizes there's a lot lacking in the budget. So that's why she's begun by clarifying things. Let me first answer her first charge, that what has Aam Aadmi Party done for the middle class? The middle class is a huge segment in which what we also call, there are people who are low middle class, they avail of government welfare schemes. Arvind Kejriwal ensures that every household in Delhi saves 25